Whenever Jesus taught spiritual or moral truth, he often used parables. Now, a parable is a short story with an earthly setting, but within it, it has a heavenly meaning. And we also see throughout his teaching that his parables were sometimes full of surprises. And there was a general consensus that he spoke with an authority and knowledge that none of the other rabbis could emulate. His teaching made such an impact on people that even today, when someone who knows nothing about Christ talks about hiding their talents or being a good Samaritan or turning the other cheek, they are paying tribute to the sheer impact of Jesus, as well as to the staying power and longevity of his teaching. And here in Luke 14, verses 15 to 24, we see Jesus at a dinner party held by one of the senior Jewish leaders. And he uses this moment to tell them a story about the kingdom of God and to issue a warning about refusing God's invitation to believe in Jesus. So here's the story. A man of great wealth and position arranges to have a party and sends the invitations out well in advance. And at this time in history, it was the custom to issue the first invitation well in advance because the preparations for such a lavish party would take some time. And then on the day that it's ready, the man sends his servant out to say to the invitees, "Come, for everything is now ready." However, we find that as the servant tells them that everything is ready, the guests start to make excuses. And when the news of this reaches the host, he becomes angry, and he sends the servant back out to find and bring in others. He tells the servant, "Go out quickly to the streets and lanes of the city and bring in the poor and crippled and blind and lame." You see, the host wants the servant to fill every place at the party. Now, on the surface, this seems to be a simple story, but it is a serious story that is meant to leave us thinking. And the way I would like to look at this is through the eyes of the characters. Now, there are three sets of characters for us to observe. Firstly, there's the host. Secondly, there's the servant. And thirdly, the guests. Firstly, note that the host is described as the master of the house in verse 21. Now, Jesus is using the host as a picture of God. And this story reveals something of God's attitude and nature toward us. And you see, the first point that Jesus makes is that there is nothing stingy about God. Look at verse 16. A man once gave a great party and invited many. And have you ever noticed how people innately believe that anything that is fun must not include God? But here we see Jesus present God as a party host on a massive scale. And it's important to note the generosity of the host. He's throwing a great party. He's invited many, and we find out at the end of the story that everyone is actually invited. Now, secondly, we see the servant. And the servant is Jesus in this story. And you see, this is important because as the servant seeks out the guest, Jesus is saying that we don't have to search for God because he's already searching for us. He has sent Jesus to show himself and to extend the invitation. And Jesus has come into the world to show us that there is a God who made us, who holds us in his hands. He loves us and he wants us to experience the good things of life. He invites us to his party. He offers to share relationship with us. And the servant invites us to come. And as Jesus tells this story, he also shows us what the kingdom of God is like. I mean, have you ever wondered what eternity with God is really like? Is it about effort or piety? Is it about doing the right thing? Well, the thing that stands out for me in this passage is that it is a celebration. Jesus says that at the heart of the Christian experience is a party, and not just any old party, but a lavish banquet where everything is there and everything is ready. Now, as I alluded to earlier, one of the most commonly accepted pieces of misinformation is that heaven is dull, that the Christian life is a bore. I mean, how often have you heard people say, when I die, I would rather be in hell hanging out with my friends than to go to heaven? You see, people truly believe that to follow Jesus will rob you of your joy and rob you of your excitement. But just think about it. Do you really think those who knew Jesus, whether they followed him or not, found him a bore? I mean, just take this dinner party here at the start of our story as an example. It says they were watching him carefully. In fact, hardly anybody spoke. And these were the wealthy, the well-educated, the politically important people of the day. And they were captivated by him. And when you think about it, I mean, do you think it would be dull to have lunch with someone who raised people from the dead? Or do you think it would be dull to speak with someone who people said was able to teach with astonishing insight and authority? Well, of course you couldn't. I mean, how could you? Now look at the servant's invitation in verse 17. Come, for everything is now ready. And what the servant means by everything is ready is that through Jesus' death on the cross, God has prepared everything that is necessary for us to be in a restored relationship with him and join in the celebration. There's nothing more to do other than to believe in Jesus and come. I mean, that is the point of the invitation. You see, we are separated from God by our sin. But the bridge over that gap that separates from him was established at the cross. When Jesus died there, he cried, "It is finished." And what finished were the preparations. That was the end of the preparation. There was nothing more that needed to be done to offer us salvation from our sin and the ability to enter into a right relationship with God. You see, we don't need to do anything special. We don't need to be anything special. We just need to come. Now, our next set of characters are the guests. And you see them there in verse 18. They all alike began to make excuses. Now, the man in verse 18 says, "I have bought a field. I must go and see it." I mean, who buys a piece of land without seeing it first? The second man in verse 19 says, "I've bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I need to go examine them." The third man in verse 20 says, "I have married a wife, therefore I can't come." And what they're really saying is, I have found something better to do, and I cannot be bothered to come to your party. You see, their one overriding sin is to find other things more attractive than their friendship with the host, with God. And as I look at the excuses made here, I started to realize that the point was not that the excuses were shallow or unworthy. From a human perspective, they are actually about serious affairs, personal, business, and family affairs. And I have, for example, known people who have refused the invitation of Christ because they had a spouse or a family member at home they knew would be upset, angry by it. And so it makes some sense that a person can find themselves unable to respond if their spouse or their partner or someone very close to them will simply not have it. So with that in mind, why is the host so angry? Well, it has to do with our final point, which is a warning in verse 24. Now, we've seen the invitation as well as the refusals, and finally we see the warning. At the very moment when it came to a choice between possessions, business, and family, or the invitation of the host was pushed into second place. He was treated as second choice. Now, do you ever treat God less than first choice? Now, I'm not going to make any assumptions here because it is in all of our hearts. It's just one of the curses of being human. It's simply a hallmark of being a sinner. All the urgent things of the day that we treat so seriously, but the things of God we put into second place. You see, that's the picture here. And here we have a story that is so full of good news, and then it ends with such a definite message. Look at verse 24. It says, "For I tell you, none of these men who were invited will taste my banquet." And we have to realize there's nothing vindictive in that statement. The host is simply saying that I will not postpone the banquet, and if they won't come, they will just have to miss it. You see, the Lord has already set the date and the time for the banquet. Everyone has been invited by personal invitation. And if I desire to miss it, it's my choice. If I desire to ignore it, it's my choice. And it's an amazing invitation, because this is the God that we push away, the God we turn our backs on, the God we disobey, the God whose heart we have broken, and still He invites us. Come. This word come is an important word in the Bible. If there is one word that explains God's attitude toward humanity, it is this word, come. And so many never understand this, and they're only able to ever see God as a short-tempered ogre, when in fact the Bible tells us the Lord is a God of love, saying, come, come. You know, this is the message of the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation. In the Old Testament, we see God speaking in Isaiah saying, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and buy and eat without money. Just come. And we see Jesus in the New Testament saying, come to me, all you who labor, and I will give you rest. You see, at the heart of this story is a God who has made Himself known to us through Jesus Christ. And it's through Jesus that He issues this invitation to come. Now, if you have not yet accepted this invitation, have you thought about why you haven't? Is it your work? Is it your relationship? Is it your things? Is it your pride? Is it what other people might think of you? Well, if it's any of these, then ask yourself, are these things bringing me satisfaction and fulfillment? Are they meeting my deepest fears and longings? And if the answer to that question is no, then ask yourself, what is more important in my life than making friends with God and accepting His invitation? See, the opportunity He offers us is magnificent beyond anything that I could possibly describe to you. But while it is wonderful and gracious, it is also a very serious invitation. And I pray that if you have not taken it up already, then you will take it so seriously that you might take it up this very hour. You see, the invitation to come is open to you.